Interesting TCM and Acupuncture. Part 11. Research into sensation along the channels and its principles. Editor's note. Professor Jiang Wu, Honorary Dean of the Toronto College of Traditional Chinese Medicine, Canada, and representative inheritor of TCM acupuncture and moxibustion, recognized by the UNESCO as the intangible cultural heritage of mankind, passed away in China on April 9th, 2021, at the age of 91. Professor Jiang Wu made great contributions to TCM acupuncture, especially the study of meridian transmission feeling, acupuncture technique, and the study of classical literature. This article is dedicated to Professor Jiang, and Professor Jiang Wu will live forever in our hearts. Contents. Overview. Research of meridian transmission feeling and rules of qi movement of meridians. Professor Jiang Wu and his team's work on feeling of channel circulation in the 14 meridians, research on charts. Discoveries from history. Summary. 1. Overview. Origin. In 1972, Richard Nixon began the international establishment of acupuncture. Today's modern research into the nature of meridians and collaterals also became mature around this time. In 1973, the People's Liberation Army established doctors from 301 hospitals to carry out observations on patients to observe their response to being treated with acupuncture, and established that the feeling associated with needling followed specific pathways. This movement of feeling was named meridian circulation sensation. Originally, this phenomenon was referred to as meridian and collateral sensitivity. Later, it was formalized into the term tangible perception of meridians and collaterals. This was already recorded in the experience of experts more than 2,000 years ago in the Ma Wang Dui, Foot and Arm 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic, and the Yin Yang 11 Meridian Moxibustion Classic. People today can still observe the same phenomenon. For the past 2,000 years, people have been able to observe this activity, since it's part of the normal functioning of the living body. After many investigations, it was shown that about 1% of people are sensitive to acupuncture, and acupuncture points can induce sensation along the meridian. In addition, some people develop sensation along the meridian during illness, which disappears after recovery. The phenomenon of sensation transmission along the meridian suggests that there are information transmission pathways on the surface of the human body, and even linear material structures that we do not yet understand completely. In the 1970s and 80s, China conducted a systematic study of this phenomenon. The Ministry of Health issued a unified method and classification standard for the observation of phenomenon of electrical stimulation of meridians at the Jingwell points or UN source points, in order to understand what the different sensations would be like among members of the general population in an effort to establish a model. The different levels of occurrence are divided into 4 types: sensitive, more sensitive, slightly sensitive, and insensitive. A large-scale census was conducted across the country, and it was found that the incidence of sensitivity was 20.3% among each 170,000 people, of which the more sensitive type appeared at a rate of 0.35%. At the same time, it was found that the phenomenon of the sense transmission along the meridian has the characteristics of following the meridian, affecting the meridian, creating stagnation, slowing bidirectionally, and making the sense of the illness worse. The research on the phenomenon of transition among the meridian continues to develop, from the spontaneous appearance of controlled stimulation and the description of subjective feelings to the record of objective experiments, from the observation of phenomena to the clarification of mechanisms of action, from the theoretical research to clinical application. The understanding is getting deeper and deeper. This research on the mechanism of sensation transmission along the meridians is an important way to reveal the essence of meridians. 2. Phenomenon of feeling in the meridians. The phenomenon of propagated sensation along the channel, otherwise known as PSC, is that when acupuncture points are stimulated by needle, electrical pulses, and other methods, the human body will have some special sensations: aching, swelling, or numbness, and other special sensations starting from the stimulated acupoints. Following the classical medical books, the recorded meridian conduction along the route is the most common meridian phenomenon. Some people think that the description of the meridian activity route in the ancient literature may contain the understanding of the phenomenon of perceptual transmission along the meridian. 3. Visible meridian phenomenon. Visible meridian phenomenon is a form of physical and chemical reaction of the meridians. It shows that the circulation and distribution of meridians by changing the body surface's shape. After the reaction is on the body surface, it can show the area along which a pathogenic phenomenon is taking place, and its shape is quite stable. This includes meridian imaging of skin diseases, meridian imaging of skin mound zone, meridian imaging of red lines and white lines, meridian imaging of pigment zones, blood zones, sweat zones, and so on. When researching congenital response, it was shown that there were ectodermic tissue changes. In post-birth research, it was shown that there are systematic changes in the outer brain layer. Observing skin illnesses in relation to sensation of the meridians, there was significant evidence which showed that the skin rashes were spread along the channel in exactly the same way along the channels discussed in classical texts, with a degree of 0.3012 centimeters. For skin illnesses following the line of the channels, such as neurodermatitis, lichen planus, scleroderma, etc., can all be treated with appropriate acupuncture and meridian therapy. Normally, this method used with acupuncture with magnetotherapy. The level of magnetism was around 300 times 10 over 4T. The magnetic sheet was affixed to the relevant meridian points, and the back shu and yun points on the opposite side of the diseased meridian were applied. Visible meridian phenomena may also occur after acupuncture causes the sense transmission along the meridian, such as the skin mound zone along the meridian and the bleeding zone along the meridian. 4. Categorization of felt transmission along the meridian. Tangible feeling. This connects to the brain and can be felt as an obvious and clear sensation in the meridians. Hidden feeling. This does not connect to the brain and does not generate a clear feeling in the meridians. Tangible feeling has some particular prerequisites which allow for a feeling to emerge. Hidden feeling in 60 to 90% of cases can be stimulated to become tangible. 2. Research of meridian transmission feeling and rules of qi movement of the meridians. Meridian transmission feeling was researched originally in 1975 in Xi'an and went on to become national research project headed up by the Acupuncture Research Discussion Organization as one of their main topics of research. This was a major national project. The topics covered were 1. The feeling associated with needling of specific acupoints. 2. The feelings associated with particular meridians. 3. The relationship between the outer body and inner organs. 4. Research of needling in the treatment of pain. 5. Research of needle adjustment. The research into the meridian feeling was later renamed as the research of perception of the circulation of the meridians. This was the second major research topic of the organization. The 5 major topics and their 10 topics of clinical therapy went on to be a major element of Chinese national research into acupuncture. The Heilongjiang Province Provincial Acupuncture Group engaged in this research together with the Provincial Health Protection Department of Science Education. The Health Protection Department of Science Education transferred the research to the Heilongjiang National Medicine Research Association, known today as the Heilongjiang Chinese Medicine Research Association. The scholar Zhang Jin. Because Dr. Jin's research was viewed as prestigious, the work of the research was given over to his supervision. He arranged the team to carry out the research and picked Li Yongguan, Tong Yujie, Zhang Mengxiang, Chu Shaozhong, and Bei Tingfu, among others, in the city of Mudanjiang, Hailin, and Harbin. The study of the meridians is not only derived from medicine, but is a major aspect of the natural sciences of the Chinese nation. Professor Zhang Jin began to study the perception of acupuncture applications since the 1960s. The feeling of being needled is another way to speak about the perception of meridians. He brought together these 2 studies and combined them together in his research. He also has exceptional foundational research in the classics of acupuncture and a highly developed hand technique. So he was able to guide this research into meridian perception and advance the study of Chinese acupuncture in Mox Bastian. His direction of study was broad and his experience considerable, so he quickly became a national leader and acclaimed doctor of Heilongjiang. He focused on this in application in clinic and obtained considerable results in treatment. His hand techniques were able to set down a benchmark, and he was able to quickly advance in his research. Professor Zhang Jin, while in Mudanjiang, opened this research. He separated it into 3 parts. First was 854 participants who were observed to find out their perception of meridians during needling. It was found that overall the results were similar to other previous research. Although the research was conducted a year later, it would be found that overall the results were similar to previous research. Although the research was conducted a year later, it became the preferred study in China. The second aspect was in observing response at deeper levels in order to understand principles of meridian perception. After observing the manifestation of response, they could not stop their research. They had to research the relationship of inner and outer when considering perceptual manifestations in relation to clinical application. The third step is in observing 2,107 patients. They discovered 8 key principles which were considered to be universal versus hidden, excitability versus controllability, pathogenicity versus effectivity, regular circulation versus change. Perception of circulation in the meridians is universally contained in all people. This essential concept is the root of the study and its foundation. Even though this feeling is endemic, typically it's hidden and not obvious. Using a stimulating hand technique can elicit an appearance of otherwise hidden feeling. At the same time, this can assist in the treatment of illness and has excellent results in clinical application. Research on sensation of circulation in the meridians is also a form of research on chi circulation in the meridians. Below, we will clarify the 8 major features of the research, including universal, hidden, stimulatory, controlled, pathogenic, effective, circulatory, and changing. 1. The universal nature of meridian circulation perception. Regardless of gender, age, occupation, ethnicity, multiple Chinese ethnic groups were researched, as well as people from other countries. The sensation of movement in the meridians was able to be elicited through stimulation. It was also possible by using different levels of stimulation to elicit different levels of perceptual activity. A total of 170,000 people researched, and it was discovered that perception of circulation in the channels was universal. Perception of movement of qi in the meridians was universal, and the movement was relative to needle stimulation and hand technique, which were used as the foundations of the study. 2. Perception of meridian circulation hidden character. The perception of circulation in the meridians is universal, but it's different at different times in each person and has few particular details deciding its levels of availability. 1, the degree to which someone has lost physical function during illness. 2, relative relaxation and comfort of the area being stimulated and appropriate stimulation, needle, moxotype, type of needle, electric needle, music. With appropriate stimulation, the hidden perception can manifest as obvious perception. Chinese experts suited 4,608 patients and discovered that hidden perception accounted for 65% of cases. Within these studies, there were times when needle stimulation provided no specific perceptual effect, but caused an effect on the body. Some illness conditions manifested into intense feelings at some times and no feelings at other times, and sometimes produced quite large effects. After clinical observation in 1976, Professor Jiang Wu put forward the concept of hidden stimulation. In 1977, it was brought one step forward when it was further researched and replicated in Beijing. The obvious perception and hidden perception operate on a principle of mutual transfer and can be discovered through studies and understood. Universal perception of meridian circulation within the hidden paradigm often resulted as a product of loss of function of physical functions and lack of function of the meridian. It was found when adjusting the needles using stimulation. Twisting, scratching the needle, and moving qi hand methods, the hidden perception of movement could be changed to obvious perception of circulation. Needle hand movements are an essential specialty of Chinese medicine. 3. Pathological change and perception of circulation in the meridians. Pathological change refers to the patient and the ill meridian. The ability to feel the meridian actively among people who were already ill was quite high, indicating that there was a direct linear pathway running from a threaded point. This means that the feeling of stimulation and the illness have a direct relationship relative to the pathway of the diseased meridian. Chinese scholars have observed that the meridians belonging to the diseased viscera have a higher rate of positive transmission than other meridians. In 1976, Professor Jiang Wu's team observed a group of 2,107 cases of obvious perceptual activity, and the patient response rate was 82.2, which was significantly higher than the 17.8% of healthy people. In the observation of 39,537 respondents, the perceptual response rate of patients was 70 to 93%, and that of healthy people was only 6 to 21%. Among the 150 kinds of common diseases observed, the phenomenon of patients' sense of circulation along the meridian was widespread. In the observation of 240 meridians of deaf-mute patients in the induction group, it was found that 91.8% had a response, which fully shows that the phenomenon of induction transmission along the meridians is more prevalent among patients who are ill. Illness is a reflection of the imbalance of the body. At this time, the phenomenon of sense transmission along the meridians is significant. The meridian channels will be sensitized from the usual latent recessive state to an active dominant state. that indicates sense transmissions in presence of qi. The phenomenon of reaching disease is the pathophysiological basis of meridian theory, which provides conditions for acupuncture and meridian treatment. The factor of extraperceptual activity of the meridians during the pathogenic state occupies a very important position in the general law of perception of circulation along the meridian. Controlling the stimulation direction of the acupuncture sensation, such as traversing, absorbing, pressing, crossbow, and the hand skills such as blue dragon swinging the tail, white tiger shaking his head, that elicit feelings in the meridian, are specific operations for which generate sensations in the meridian of people with meridian pathologies, which can control the meridian qi and directly affect the disease of the patient. 4. The effect of meridian circulation sensation. The sensation of the meridians and their qi have a direct relationship with illness and clinical application. Accompanying the feeling of circulation in the meridians was skin numbness produced along the route of transmission, and various sensations were reduced. Some subjects experienced sweating, congestive red lines, anemic white lines, and even bleeding along the meridian. The viscera and organs reached by the sensation will have an effect response, causing various physiological function changes and changes on extant pathologies. For example, when the senses transferred to the eyes, the vision of some subjects were improved. If the sense was transferred to the stomach, some patients immediately felt a sense of heat or hunger in the stomach area. Some patients with coronary heart disease, angina pectoris, obtained relief from heart pain. Compared with subjective sensory transmission, this is an objective indicator and is an important basis for establishing an animal model. The spiritual pivot said, the key to needling lies in the arrival of qi, upon which benefit may be obtained. If the wind blows the clouds away, one may see the bright blue sky. This is the refinement of needle technique. Thus, it's clear that the people of the past understood the concept of the arrival of qi as the means by which effective treatment could be obtained. This also relates to feeling along the meridians, and the arrival of qi has clear applications within clinical treatment. This is why all generations of acupuncturists have always worked hard to master proper technique in order to be effective. After 1973, there were 13 studies with 269 participants each, experiencing specific symptoms of pain in isolated body parts who were treated with acupuncture. In total, there were 174 patients who obtained relief, 67 of whom obtained major relief, and 2 participants who obtained no relief whatsoever. Considering this qi arrives and stops pain, and qi arrives and disease is stripped away, we can see that, in fact, there is a universal reaction to treatment. Effectiveness in a clinical setting has a dual ability to adjust illnesses. Typically, when the body becomes weak and vacuous, it can be adjusted by adding strength. And when the body's in excess flourishing, it's possible to subdue it through treatment. Acupuncture needle technique may be used in both of these areas, adjusting meridians. 5. Perception of movement in the meridians caused by stimulation. The stimulation causing meridian sensation is relative to the techniques such as adhering, shaking, twisting, rocking, and so on. The movement of the needle or the electric stimulation of the needle and its relative length and intensity can cause the meridians to experience qi sensations and augment it. So that weakness can become strong, shortness can become long, hidden nature can become tangible, and so on. This is called perceptual stimulation. Professor Jiang Wu and his group held a 1975 study with 240 participants with electric needling, which was used in short frequency to stimulate the channels and create feeling from weak to strong, from short to long, from hidden to tangible. This was called stimulation-based perceptual manipulation. This method had an 87.4 positive result, and in 1976, they also executed another study on deaf and mute patients who were given stimulation. The patients started out with hidden and short meridian feeling. There were 336 total meridians treated, and 250 of them experienced change to obvious and long feeling. The success rate of the stimulation was 74.4%. In 1977, in Beijing, professors used traditional needling, using slightly modified twisting, shaking, adhering, and so on to invigorate qi. They had 45 patients and stimulated them a total of 1,614 times. They noted feeling on the joints among 82.5% of patients. Professor Jiang Wu and his team used the addition of heat to the meridian and were able to obtain clear results in 34.6% of patients. When electric needling was combined, they were able to achieve results in 80% of patients. Perception in the channels, they were able to use stimulation to allow the qi to interact with illness in the same way as set down in traditional acupuncture theory. 6. The control of feeling of meridian movement. The process is related to the control of the differential change of the feeling along the meridian and the feeling of needle insertion. In the 1960s, Professor Zhang Jin and his team in Heilongjiang province found through their research that the relative strength used in needle insertion, the degree of lifting or inserting, the twisting of the needle, and the direction of the needle tip all had impact on the degree of perceived feeling along the meridian. The techniques of kneading, pressing, smoothing, and absorbing were used, and it was discovered that the pressing method, using its obstructive application, had considerable ability to lead feeling in the meridians. The clogging method caused a feeling of pressure in the channel, and it was discovered that it had the ability to stimulate fluids in the area as well as reduce heat, etc. Some nerves were also able to be affected through obstruction and made different presentations. Clogging could be used to go against the normal direction and move the effects of obstruction, stopping the feeling in the meridian. Returning flow feeling was established after stopping needle stimulation and caused a feeling to emerge from the body which returned back toward the acupoint. The ability to cause a condensing stimulation clearly showed that the feeling of stimulation of the channel was inherent and not subjective to each person, and that it was possible to control the stimulation, allowing for later research to be done on a deeper level and reveal more about the nature of this phenomenon. After treating 121 channels on people who were sensitive to stimulation, this first showed that the path of stimulation could change according to the time, and that the degree of pressure used in insertion could increase the amount of sensation along the channel, as well as assist in bringing qi to the area to treat illness. Of the 121 channels treated, the percentage of those unable to have sensation control was 33.9, while those who could experience controlled sensation were 83.5. Those who could not have controlled stimulation, who had qi arrival at the point of illness, was 71.9, while those who were sensitive to stimulation control had qi arrive at the point of illness was 97.5. If one is adept at hand technique, it was possible to elicit either warming or cooling sensation along the channel. This was enabled through change in stimulation of the needle, making it appear in accordance with objective needs, and it can be changed to passive into active in acupuncture treatment. There is no question that the discovery of the rules of needle insertion and channel stimulation has pushed forward the study of acupuncture in clinic. 7. The circulatory nature of feeling in the meridian. Students of Chinese medicine have for many years discussed the feeling of the channels in their respective paths. The Spiritual Pivot chapter on meridians and vessels already interrogated this subject in depth and holds that the channels and paths and follow a particular and consistent path of movement. However, there are also times at which their paths may differ. This type of change is called excessive or insufficient movement of the meridians. Normally, every meridian has a particular pathway of feeling which can be stimulated from the acupoint and directed along the channel. There are only a few that have branches in the four limbs where there are no branches. The feeling along the meridians is typically direct, but on the torso and the head and the face, the sensation of movement is less, and on the torso, there's a tendency to deviate from the meridian path and sometimes a transference to another meridian path. On the face, this ability to change is considerable, and no matter which point is stimulated, it is often the case that when there's an illness condition, there is considerable divergence, and the original channel tends to move in the direction of the illness. The sensation of feeling along the channel could change speeds and become very slow. Every second, it would rise approximately 1 millimeter and stop at 10 centimeters, or sometimes as much as 20 centimeters. Each individual was similar to lightning in feeling. The slow one would persist for several minutes The slow one would persist for several minutes as it traveled the area of the channel. This speed differential cannot be easily explained with the theory of the nervous system, and all of the various nerves could be made to have sensation very quickly. Two-direction perception along the meridian. From the point of needle insertion, there was often a feeling either leaving from the heart or returning to the heart. There was also a track along which this path moved. This related to location of needling, hand method, method of stimulation, warmth, and so on. Method of stimulation, opposite stimulation. There were the same points of both sides of the body were stimulated. It was called opposite stimulation. Depth of feeling. It was not uncommon for the feeling to be on the stimulation to be felt on the surface, below the skin, in the muscles or in the organs. Width. In the limbs, it tended to be a slender feeling, while in the body it was a thicker feeling. The feeling was generally between 0.5 to 3 0.5 to 3 centimeters. Transfer point feeling. Feeling often stopped at certain points and became stronger. When it stopped in those places, it tended to aggregate within the cavity and thus illustrates the presence of an acupoint there. Ghostline feeling. For people who had lost a limb, it's possible to stimulate certain points and cause them to have a sensation of feeling where the limb used to be. In some people, this feeling can be replicated in such a way that they can feel the movement along the meridian where their limb used to be. Professor Jiang Jin's research team tested 49,032 meridians and observed that the results were produced and entirely reflected the records of the direction of the meridians in classical Chinese medical documents in 16% of patients. There was a response of 2/3 of the stimulation arriving at the illness and entering other channels of 57%, and very few that did not have any sense along the channel. This sensation was typically about 1 to 4 millimeters wide and could be verified in particular acupoints and directions of the channels. After observing 3,494 meridians, Beijing focused on 88, which showed clear stimulation along the meridians. They tended to have mounds, which developed along the channel as a result of stimulation. Feeling along the channels is a manifestation of channel qi collecting in certain areas and is the result of needling using various manipulative techniques. 8. Meridian circulation feeling transformation. In 20 Chinese provinces and autonomous zones, studies were conducted on the movement of feeling in the channel and their change in direction. This change was frequently observed, and Prof. Jiang Jin and his team observed 471 meridians under these conditions and observed that 23.5% deviated, as well as many created stimulation and other points in the body unrelated to the channel. They understood that this change of feeling often represented feeling in the channel as related to a particular illness condition. They found that this feeling could be brought from the hidden to obvious level, and that the path of stimulation could be wide, narrow, deep, or shallow, and change between those various features, including the nature of feeling, direction, speed, and were different relative to time of application. All of these can be explained as transformation of sensation along the meridians. Professor Jiang Jin and his team deeply researched this subject and noted that the sensation could travel from path to path, and the concept of meridians is actually a model of the functional nature of the body, rather than a precise anatomical representation. The feeling in the meridians had 8 specific rules with a profound relationship that could not be automatized. Researching the special features and their relationship is vital to proper clinical application and will advance the ability of practitioners to obtain good results in treatment. The hand method used decides the direction of stimulation and its principles and can make the meridian qi fly up the channel. This can also change the hot and cold condition of the body, as well as vacuity and repletion, and increase clinical applicability, arriving at better results in healing illness. 3. Professor Jiang Jin and his team's work on feeling of channel circulation in the 14 meridians, research on charts. In the 1970s in Heilongjiang province, Professor Jiang Jin and his team of researchers had already established the ability to circulate qi in the channels such that it would arrive at the disease location. After more than 10 years of research, they worked with the utmost focus on researching and collecting data to form the principles of circulating sensation in the channels to arrive at the disease area. Professor Jiang's team included researchers Li Yongguan, Chu Shaozhong, Li Qiang, Zhang Wensun, Zhou Jingyu, Li Zijiu, among others. Altogether, there were 40 diagrams made to explain the feeling along the channels in relation to illness locations. Their original document showed 4,086 results of experiment, including deaf and mute, lung tumor, coronary heart disease, optic nerve inflammation, optic nerve atrophy, facial paralysis, headache, tuberculosis, stomach ulcer, gallbladder inflammation, and so on. Within the research pathways, there were 14 major meridians with acupoints, and a total of 40 images were made detailing the results of needling those areas. In the test, an electrical D-needle and an electric heating D-needle were used. Researched the Jingwell points of 12 channels on left and right sides and did not limit themselves to left and right. They found that feeling was not entirely determined by strength of insertion. They found that the acupoint and strength of stimulation could be activated for up to 2 minutes. They researched adjusting the frequency, strength, and other factors in needle manipulation, and were able to make them palpable in patients. In the case of centrifugal. In the case of centrifugal force, they used acupuncture to block it. Moving the needle insertion to 30 degrees on the acupoint, it seems like this is the most ideal method to elicit an electrical response. Stimulate the spots with saline to facilitate conduction. Observing the hand methods and how they elicit response, color change is described in the meridian and acupoint map, as well as accompanied by the text. They described every channel feeling overlaid with each channel and put them together in an image. This image has thick lines which illustrate the lines of each section and how it's used to slow the path of channel sensation. The thin lines are less and show where the sensation meets with the illness. The plus sign means qi reaches the sick place. The greater yin lung meridian of the hand. The greater yin lung meridian of the hand illnesses include lung cancer, deafness, optic nerve inflammation, coronary heart disease. 1. Image of lung cancer in the greater lung yin meridian of the hand. Illness name, lung cancer, lung cell oxidation leading to tumor formation. Meridian name, left side greater yin lung meridian of the hand. Acupoints, Shaoshang to Yuji, Shaoshang to Taiyuan, Shaoshang to Liechui, Shaoshang to Kongzui, Shaoshang to Chizhe, Shaoshang to Jiabai, Shaoshang to Tianfu, Shaoshang to Yunnan, Shaoshang to Zhongfu. Numbers, Shaoshang to Yuji, 1. Point, Zhongfu, number 4. Shaoshang to Taiyuan, 10. Shencang, 4. Shaoshang to Liuchui, number 4. Point, Huozhong, number 3. Shaoshang to Kongzui, number 3. Point, Kufang, number 1. Shaoshang to Chizhe, number 19. Point, Wuyi, number 4. Shaoshang to Jiabai, number 3. Point, Yingchuang, number 2. Shaoshang to Tianfu, number 10. Shaoshang to Yunnan, number 5. Shaoshang to Zhongfu, number 9. People with lung cancer have a clear pathway along which the sensation can be made on the lung meridian that can arrive at the point where the illness is in the lung. It runs from Shaoshang and passes Yuji, Taiyuan, Liechui, Kongzui, Chizhe, Jiabai, Tianfu, Yunnan, Zhongfu, and leaves the meridian at Zhongfu and passes to Shencang, Huozhong, Kufang, Wuyi, Yingchuang, and at Yingchuang enters into the illness. 2. Hearing sensation for people suffering from deafness in the greater yin lung meridian of the hand. Illness name, deafness with inability to hear. Channel name, greater yin lung meridian of the hand. Channel points, Shaoshang to Yuji, Shaoshang to Taiyuan, Shaoshang to Jingchu, Shaoshang to Liechui, Shaoshang to Kongzui, Shaoshang to Chizhe, Shaoshang to Jiabai, Shaoshang to Tianfu, Shaoshang to Yunnan, Shaoshang to Zhongfu. The greater yin lung meridian of the hand, which is expressed in the pathway of the meridians rising from the Shaoshang, passing Yuji, Taiyuan, Liechui, Kongzui, Chizhe, Jiabai, Tianfu, Yunnan, and Zhongfu, then it leaves the meridian at Yunmen and passes to Futu, Xiaguan, Jiache, Tianrong, Armen, Lianchuan, Jiaosun, Yifeng, and arrives at the disease. 3. Optic nerve inflammation, picture of the greater yin lung meridian of the hand. Illness name, inflammation of the ocular nerve. Meridian name, left greater hand yin lung meridian. Meridian points, Shaoshang to Kongzui, Shaoshang to Chizhe, Shaoshang to Tianfu. People with ocular nerve inflammation have a meridian line which runs from their greater yin lung meridian of the hand. It rises from Shaoshang, passes Kongzui, Chizhe, and Tianfu, and separates traveling to Jingming, Tianfu, and Tongziliao, where it enters the illness. 4. Coronary heart disease, greater yin meridian of the hand pathway image. Illness name, coronary heart disease. Channel name, right hand greater yin lung meridian. Meridian points, Shaoshang to Yuji, Shaoshang to Taiyuan, Shaoshang to Jingchu, Shaoshang to Liechui, Shaoshang to Kongzui, Shaoshang to Chizhe, Shaoshang to Jiabai, Shaoshang to Tianfu, Shaoshang to Yunnan, Shaoshang to Zhongfu. People with coronary heart disease have a direct line of transmission through the greater yin lung meridian of the hand, which rises from Shaoshang and passes Yuji, Taiyuan, Liechui, Kongzui, Chizhe, Jiabai, Tianfu, Yunnan, and Zhongfu. It separates at Zhongfu and travels to Shencang, Qishe, Wuyi, Zhourong, Huozhong, and enters the illness. The feeling traveling the meridian has general hidden illness presentation, effective stimulatory control, and change characteristics. Among them, illness presentation is an extremely important problem. It is the hub of the meridian transmission and clinical connection. It's the path along which feeling passes that serves as the hub for clinical practice. It includes feeling and can be seen in many people presenting with illness. In ill meridians, it's easy to find the direction of the illness. From the needle stimulation at specific points, we can see that the feeling moves in the diseased area along the specific path of the meridian. When the tree arrives at the illness, there are many pathways in the illness along which feeling may manifest. The feeling of the meridian has 8 rules in its theory, and there are many similarities to the doctrines of ancient medicine, and can be an effective and predictable guide to clinical acupuncture practice. Professor Jiang Jin and his team discovered that meridian sensation pathways have definite lines and that pictures of the meridians are a model for this function. 4. Discoveries from history. Looking back at the history of meridian research in Heilongjiang. In 1957, Heilongjiang Province National Medical Research Association created an acupuncture research division to study channels and meridians. At the time, they attempted to establish definite locations of the meridians. In total, the study lasted 2 years. Later, Professor Jiang Jin wrote 385 articles about their observations and discoveries in the meridian measurement. It is actually a measurement of skin resistance. Because their tools were relatively simple, it meant that the tests were not overly invasive, and all points of the body were moist, and the testing strengths must be factored into their results. When they observed the acupoint and their illness characteristics, they found that ground resistance dropped, but they could not say for sure what the result was. At this time, the Chinese acupuncture world was partly comprised of Pyongyang, North Korean Kim Bonghan researchers who claimed to have found what is called the little phoenix body. Heilongjiang National Medical Research Association understood that this was just a scam. Professor Jiang Jin researched 19,544 patients, and their response to needles improved, and coupled with the negative results of the little phoenix body research, began to believe that the sensation transmission along the meridians is not a specific organizational structure, but a functional phenomenon of the body. Not long later, in 1966, the Cultural Revolution began. Professor Jiang Jin was labeled a reactionary and forced to contemplate his political crimes under arrest. He lived on the top bunk of a prison bedroom, where the revolutionaries asked him to write essays reflecting on his crimes. He used this opportunity to push forward his research of meridians and considered the issue of the little phoenix body and the past mistakes of this research. After not too long, it pushed forward his new way of thinking. He discovered the relationship between needle insertion and feeling of arrival of qi, as well as the ability to control the feeling of the channels through needle technique. He considered the relationship between Zhang Zhongjing's Shanghan Lun theory and found a way to push forward the evolution of bedside treatment. Summarizing it, he felt that the rules within the text were real principles and that they could be used to explain clinical practice. After a while, he was released from self-reflection and worked on his following meridians feeling principles research, establishing its basis. Meridian research of 16 characters for the practice of needling. In 1975, under the lead of Qianxing Zhong, Xi'an opened a national needle research work team to understand needle sensation. Heilongjiang followed suit in establishing its own similar association. Professor Jiang Jin observed 854 patients and observed their response to needle insertion was universal. It could have dual directional stimulation. It could be fast or slow. It could be controlled. It could follow the channel. When the feeling passed to the organs and viscera, it could create change in the area. The results of the combined national research was observed, and all of the findings were similar. Professor Jiang Jin believed that these results were all connected and could be used to describe the principles, which could clearly stipulate a theory of perceptual transmission along the meridians. After the observation of 2,107 patients, Professor Jiang put forward the 8 major principles of perception, transmission along the meridians. These included universal, hidden, control, stimulation, disease-related, effective, and following the pathway, as well as divergent. Together, 1,117 patients received benefit from the research of these techniques. In 1977, at Hefei, at the National Acupoint Needle Feeling and Meridian Feeling Experience Exchange Group, the principles were put forward and discussed by experts. In 1976, Professor Jiang Jin researched the principles of the rules of meridian perception transmission in relation to time and created a more refined model with a 16-character formula for needling. Verify the phenomenon, master the regular pattern, improve efficacy, clarify the essence. By this time, he had already mastered the principles and was able to advance a treatment model which could clearly explain the essential level of practice. In 1977, China used this research to push forward the national meridian perception research on needle guidance as part of the guiding strategy of the country's 7th five-year research plan. It would be incorporated in the guiding strategy for the 8th five-year climb and the 9th five-year climb pre-selection. Within the research of meridian perception, the Heilongjiang province, led by Professor Jiang, was selected as the group leader according to the national leader of acupuncture and moxibustion and medical research, Wei Mingfeng. He oversaw the research and development of theory of meridian transmission and perception. Professor Jiang Jing and his team used 10 years to put forward 12 topics to move forward their research. At the same time, the group established 8 topics which would go on to form 8 principles, which would explain the results of their observation. They established this ability to generate feeling in the channels was a new system of meridian theory. It could be used to explain the hand techniques of acupuncture and why the qi tended to move in certain ways in the channels. In the national research on transmission perception in the channels, this was the only study group to stipulate an actional theorem for the principles involved in the action of perceiving feeling in the meridians during stimulation. Theoretical research on the regularity of the sense of transmission along the meridians also proves that the sense transmission along the meridians is a pattern map. The meridian sense transmission is the regulating system of the body's functions. 3. Research on the regularity carried out during the country's 7th five-year research plan won an award for establishing its theorem. The national 7th five-year research plan project research on the regularity of sense transmission along the meridian won an award in 1990 Science Management Advancement, second grant from State Administration of Traditional Chinese Medicine. Professor Jiang Jin and his team participated in 25 events and research channel transmission perception. Of these 25 events, they completed the meridian transmission perception observable phenomena research, and in 1990 were given an award of Science Management Advancement. First grant from the State Administration of Traditional Chinese Medicine, Heilongjiang was one of the key implementation units. Between 1960 and 70, researchers established the definitive path of the meridians. From 1970 to 80, they mastered the essential principles. This established a major milestone in the development of Chinese medicine and acupuncture hand techniques, as well as the study of the meridians. 4. Pre-selected 10-year scientific research for the 8th five-year climb and the 9th five-year climb proved to have lackluster results. After the national 7th five-year research plan project to understand the definite nature of the perceived transmission along the meridians and the mastery of its principles were realized, they used this to form a 16-character formula to pass along to people in clinical research in order to master its principles and advance treatment outcomes, and finally explain it from its basis. However, between 1990 to 2000, the national pre-selected 10-year scientific research for the 8th five-year climb plan went against the research 16-word formula, affirm the phenomena, master the regular pattern, improve efficacy, clarify the essence. The experts from the 7th five-year plan project team, who came from the clinical frontline from the national research team, were excluded. In addition, a group of Western medicine research teams focusing on anatomy and physiology had been organized, and a new plan was put forth to place focus on Western medical anatomy instead, in order to focus more on material and biological research. After 10 years had passed, significant research time and effort was lost, and there was no final product. When the National Meridian Research pre-selected 9th five-year climbing preliminary project was completed, once stated in an article published on the national level of Chinese medicine newspaper, was said that the meridian feeling is one part of a physical systems adjustment, which was a restatement of what had been established 10 years before. Analysis conclusion of the National 7th five-year research plan project research on the regularity of sense transmission along the meridian won an award in 1990. It was stipulated that the sense transmission along the meridian is a pattern map. The meridian sense transmission is the regulating system of the body's functions. Because of errors in research, the previous findings were said to be invalid. Such a large amount of money and time was wasted and missed the opportunity of 10 years of scientific research. But no one takes responsibility, and the country lacked a mechanism for accountability. What was wrong with the research then? Professor Jiang Jing believed that Chinese medicine has 2 special features. One is the characteristics of functionality, which means that TCM is a functional medicine. The second is its clinical characteristics. It means that TCM, the second, is based on clinical experience. Clinical experience must be upheld, and the 2,000 years since the writing of the internal classic, Chinese doctors have never left this essence. Clinical practice in the light we follow is the light we follow, and if one observes it incorrectly, the entire system fails. Before 1975, the National 7th Five-Year Research Plan project, research on the regularity of sense transmission along the meridians, saw considerable advancement and was received warmly. In May 1979 in Beijing, the National Acupuncture Sensation Study Discussion Group put out a 52-chapter discussion about it. These publications were derived from clinical experience, and it was this experience that drove the research forward. It was only because of clinical experience that the ancestors of Chinese medicine were able to discover the medical benefits of acupuncture. TCM incorporates the functional phenomenon into the system of meridian and collateral study, and constitutes the main body of meridian study. Those who are wishing to study it must first understand the meridians and collaterals, and after that they have to learn to take pulses. They must also learn to recognize the channels by hand in order to obtain basic requirements to research this field. They absolutely cannot achieve this by memorizing books or pictures. All research results must come from practical experience in order to be effective, and the research results should be meridianization instead of divorce meridian theory. Meridianization means that the results of the research should be integrated into the meridian study of traditional Chinese medicine, so the meridian study is richer and has greater development. The research results of divorce from the meridian theory is the divorcive meridian theory, which enriches other disciplines and separates and perishes the meridian of Chinese medicine. Professor Jiang Jin's team in Heilongjiang established a theory of meridian sensation that was consistent with both ancient and modern practice, and was based on stable principles. These stipulated that the feeling along the meridians had specific rules which were discovered by 1. Researching 854 cases of meridian sensation and looking into other similar research being certain of the features of the phenomenon, such as moving with the meridian, moving differently from the meridian, two-direction movement, and so on in relation to specific frequently seen illnesses. They were then able to verify the effects of stimulation on those illnesses, and that the stimulation had gone from the point of insertion to the point of the illness, and that they were able to control the stimulation in the area. 2. After a study in 2017 patients, they discovered the essential principles of universal hidden stimulatory control illness and effective transmission of feeling along the meridians. 3. They continued to adjust this with 1,717 research subjects and discovered more deeply about the nature of change along the meridians when stimulated. 4. They researched electric needle stimulation, including Shunjing Gan Zhuan. The feeling along the meridians is actually the body surface, circulation part of the 14 meridians in the meridian theory. In clinic, acupuncture and moxibustion, it's used to guide acupuncture and moxibustion to select points, and to guide specific experiments of acupuncture techniques and moxibustion methods. The 14 meridians theory is a main branch of meridian theory. It's on a monograph on the body surface and circulation part, explaining the law of air circulation on the body surface. The 14 meridians idea originated from the Yuan Dynasty Hua Boren document, 14 Meridians Dispersion. The 14 meridians have commonly been used for over 600 years and have profound application in acupuncture. These 14 meridians set the essential principles of the meridian that are still researched today. The specific rules of moving together with the meridians and perception of movement along the meridians is the development of the theory of the 14 meridians. 5. In 1990, 30 years into their constant research, the team began between 1990 and 2020, there was no national grant for their research, but Professor Jiang Jin and his team did not stop pushing forward their study into the 16-character formula of defining paths, mastering the principles, pushing forward clinical applicability, and explaining its basis. From 1990 to 2000, Professor Jiang Jin cooperated with 10 PhD holders and 2 master's students to continue to work on this project. All adopt cross-validation of intractable diseases with the feeling along the meridian and acupuncture technique. 10 years of cross-validation has once again verified the practical value of these 8 regularities. It proves that the theory of the regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian is effective in guiding the clinical acupuncture techniques of acupuncture and moxibustion. In 2000, Professor Jiang Jin's research team researched many types of illness, including their principle of mastering the principles and advancing applications, the study of coronary heart disease, acute cerebrovascular disease, acute ischemic stroke, chest palsy, optic nerve atrophy, chronic prostatitis, seminal abnormalities, sciatica, inclined migraine, etc. And the research of needle insertion method, research on needle insertion method, research on basic training methods of acupuncture manipulation, research on basic training methods of acupuncture, preliminary discussion on the trend change before and after the comprehensive strength training of twisting the needle. The research of acupuncture sensation includes clinical experimental research on the regularity of cooling and heat, and basic acupuncture sensation. In order to spread the acupuncture sensation to the world, research on the English translation of acupuncture techniques in advance of consciousness, the needling techniques had 24 methods, which were researched and translated, including find, grasp, follow, absorb, rock, flat, twist, turn, enter, retreat, lift, pierce, scrape, shot, fly, rub, move, push, shake, rush, press, cover, search, and part. Research on English translation of the compound technique names such as burning the mountain, cooling the sky, red phoenix opens its wing, old tortoise searches the cave, and so on. As well as these techniques, they also researched Professor Jiang Jin's acupuncture technique, strategic thinking on the inheritance and development of TCM techniques, overview of the overseas inheritance and development of TCM acupuncture, the intangible cultural heritage of mankind. 6. The study of the theory of the regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian is the development and innovation of classical meridian theory. Academic Xu Guangdi, honorary dean of Chinese Academy of Engineering in the Daily Light newspaper, put down his thoughts in 2013 when he said, "In the final analysis, the job of researching science must never stop working to constant effort to discover objective regulation." The Third International Science Studies leader Chen Jiaer said, "The study of science means to take things apart before knowledge has been reached, to derive its rule. It requires observation of true principles. It moves people and society forward without stop and is an essential power of history." Because of this, we know that science research cares about the study of rules the most. The regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian is the framework of the theory of the sense transmission along the meridian. A house must be supported by beams in order to have a room. The beam is the framework. It's the essential framework of the house. The regularity of sense transmission along the meridians is the framework of the sense transmission along the meridians. Without these principles, called regularity, and the structures they offer, it would be like a house without beams. It could not be made to stand. The 8 principles of the sense transmission along the meridians are meant to help us observe the effects of those feelings in order to understand what they do. Once we understand what they represent as a whole, we can start to get a full picture which will advise us on how to appropriately treat patients and form better theory which combines both ancient and modern meridian theory. The 8 principles of the sense transmission along the meridian not only reflect all of the major historical understandings of the meridians, but also form one complete system of the meridians, which can also explain the hand methods of needling and how they work in clinic. The principles of the sense transmission along the meridian movement are many, and there are many ideas about hand movements. The hand needling method, according to the meridian perception principles, are based on practicality. The 8 principles of the sense transmission along the meridians are based on the ancient principles of meridian study, and they develop from ancient documents. This set of principles used today's thought to derive a system. This is Professor Jiang Jin's group's understanding of Chinese medicine, and is the lineage they've passed down in order to preserve and develop it. 7. Young people do not understand the principles of the sense transmission along the meridians and lack ability to use it. If we ask the younger generation of acupuncturists, they are more confused about the meridian theory and lack of understanding and research on the history of formation of meridian theory. The application of the theory of the regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian is even more lacking. They don't know that we should actively master the 8 major laws and use them in clinical practice to improve efficacy. The reason is that the study of regularity of sense transmission along the meridians during the Cultural Revolution of the last century, leaders are not first-line clinical researchers. After winning the award, they don't know how to promote their results, and the efficacy of the regulatory sense of transmission along the meridians has become more effective. Instead, the research results are locked up and put on the shelf. Experts from the 7th 5-year plan project team who came from the frontline clinics were marginalized during the 10-year period from 1990 to 2000. And it was able to move the knowledge of the study on regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian in a different direction for lack of good things to tell. So this period of history has generally been ignored. Therefore, the younger generation of acupuncturists rarely get this information, that they're confused about the meridian theory and lack application of the theory of regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian. 5. Summary. From the beginning, when the meridian lacquer model was created, all the way to the formal theory of meridian transmission, there have been 2,000 years from which the ancient experts discovered these principles. We know that the Ma Wang Dui foot and arm 11 meridian Moxibustion classic and the yin and yang 11 meridian Moxibustion classic and the lacquer acupuncture meridian model put down the knowledge we needed to develop them in modern times. After the year 2000, people discovered how this will affect the perception of meridian movement. This is because this is the body's nature showing itself. Students of Chinese medicine in the 1960s and 70s took a census of 170,000 people to move forward knowledge of the definite nature of the meridians, and were able to verify that the meridians exist. In the 1970s and 1980s, they completed the research on the regularity of sense transmission along the meridians. They discovered the 8 regularities of universality, latency, aggravating illness, effectiveness, stimulation, control, and change. The regularity of the sense transmission along the meridians is also the movement of qi along the meridian and reflects their principles. After more than 40 years of continuous research and exploration, the theory of regularity of sense transmission along the meridians is indeed an effective theory to guide clinical acupuncture and moxibustion to select points. Acupuncture techniques and effective theory of moxibustion. Application of manipulation in clinical acupuncture. None of the clinical responses of meridian qi have exceeded this theoretical framework. Research on the theory of the regularity of the sense transmission along the meridian is developed and innovated out of classical TCM meridian theory. Professor Jiang Wu put forward 16 characters to command natal techniques in 1976, which included be sure about its nature, master its regularity, push forward clinical effectiveness, clearly explain its nature. After 40 years, the steps of being sure about the nature and mastering the regularity is mature, but there's still research to be done on mastering the regularity and moving forward clinical effectiveness. This is a decades-long process which is undergoing constant maturation, and as we work on developing hand technique to push forward technique and increase clinical effectiveness. After years of research, Professor Jiang Wu's team believes that the sensory transmission along the meridians is a functional route, and the meridian diagram is a model diagram. The sensory transmission along the meridian is the regulating system of the body's function. Therefore, the study of meridians finally clarifies that the essence should not be a substantive study of finding objects, such as something anatomical or new. To be sure about its nature and master its regularity and the research on regularity of sense transmission along the meridian are the great contributions of Chinese scholars to the study of TCM acupuncture in the last century. It's an important milestone in the study of meridian and acupuncture techniques. In the future, we'll have mastered the regularity enough that we can improve clinical treatment and push forward clinical effectiveness. It will be the direction of the development of TCM acupuncture as set home and abroad in this century. Thanks for watching.